Hey everyone, before we start today's show, Alex and I would like to thank you all for listening. We're coming to the end of Season 1, and we can't wait to share with you what we have planned for Season 2. To that end, we'll be launching a Kickstarter to help produce this next season. Please stop by our website at thefourthcurtain.com/Kickstarter to pre-register for the campaign. And now, on to the show.
Well, it was a big challenge because, like, along with the many other reasons that Xbox never should have happened, one of them was that our lead game was a shooter, which at the time was considered impossible on a console, right? People were ready to die and kill everyone on that hill, because if you didn't have a mouse and a keyboard and you weren't sitting in front of a screen, you could never play a shooter. What are you, stupid, boy? What are you, stupid? Yeah, not the case.
That was Seamus Blackley, the original creator of the Xbox, talking about the unlikely origins of said Xbox, launching with a first-person shooter game,
Which nobody thought was possible at the time.
Yeah, I'm happy it worked out that way, actually.
Yeah, I bet you are. Dude, nobody thought it was possible. And we talk about it during the podcast. Let's not spoil it, but I'm gonna preemptively.
We didn't think it was possible either. We had a lot of introspective doubt along the way.
No, that's what. Hold on, before we keep going, I want to preemptively say that during the conversation, I say I didn't really like GoldenEye, and that's the truth. I know everybody loves GoldenEye, but
Man, you ain't gonna make any friends with that. I don't think so.
I know. I'm being honest. Anyways,
You might as well say you don't like Tom Hanks.
what? That's a good one. I'm on the fence with Tom Hanks now.
What?
50-50. Yeah.
Come on, it's America's favorite actor.
I'm not trying to be different, but I think that you pulled it off with Halo. I think that was the first game that was like, yeah, this is gonna work here. And then we tried to do it at IT, Industrial Toys, on mobile. That was like the goal, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was a little weird to me that first-person shooter didn't really show up on mobile.
Yeah.
For many, many years. It's still, I mean, we tried, we didn't quite turn the corner. I mean, it's
Everybody
here now.
was trying.
I mean,
There's
Call of Duty, PUBG, Fortnite, they all sort of made it work. I think it took a few iterations of the hardware to make things playable.
Yeah. I mean, there's the same thing with first-person shooters on consoles, right? There was tons of first-person shooters until Halo. So before Halo, there was Marathon on any of them? I know Doom was on the on the Super Nintendo. There was a Super Nintendo Doom, which didn't matter because you couldn't really look up and down, or at least I can't remember if you can.
There's a
Perfect Dark.
I don't know if you've read John Romero's book, but he talks about the port of Doom to
the Super
SNES.
Nintendo.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, that's a pretty interesting part of the story. And then Jonathan Bloch, he ported Doom to like Comcast box or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
Insane.
That is insane.
Yeah. All right. Are you still painting Warhammer figures? Is that still your jam?
I just started a Dreadnought, and I had to take a break because I went to New York to the playing card convention, Cardtopia. And it was, man, I love New York. I didn't know
Get
what
yourself some pizza?
Yes, I told you. What is that place? Bleecker Street? I don't know if anybody's in New York. Bleecker Street Pizza. Or Bleecker. I don't know what it's called.
Bleecker Street. That's down in the Village.
Soho. Yeah, Soho. So I went there because I met a guy from Ireland, and he was like, I've been going to all the places because he doesn't get to eat some of the food. And he was like, I went to Taco Bell. I'm like, no.
Oh.
And then, apparently he doesn't get Taco Bell. He went to Five Guys, and he was like listing off all these places. And then he goes, and then I went to the best pizza place in the world. And then he said that. And apparently they've won 3 or 4 years in a row.
Time out.
I know. You don't go from Taco Bell to that pizza.
Well, no, I mean, like you're taking
Howlin' Jack
restaurant
Cards
Reco from
Howlin' Jack
Taco
Cards.
Bell. Okay.
Sorry.
Is that who gave you the pizza recommendation? You took your pizza recommendation from somebody out of the country whose last 2, dinner spots were Taco Bell and Five Guys.
And there was another one that was like,
did you even crack open Yelp or anything?
Well, no, I kind of trusted him when he said they've won best pizza 4 times in a row.
Okay.
In New York City.
It's so good. Pizza's interesting. I grew up on the East Coast. I grew up with New York style pizza and lived in Chicago for so long. I do like the deep dish pizza, but when I think pizza, what comes into my head and what I would go for is a New York pie.
Yeah, it's really good. It's different.
So good. Yeah.
It's very good. You know, they did. What's the mall pizza? Sbarro? They do that too, right? Sbarro.
Oh, come on.
Well,
man.
I know it's not the same. I know. I don't know anything about nothing. And then there's what is the other one? The other pizza place. There's
Pizza
like
Hut?
Little Caesars. No, Little Caesars,
Little
which is what
Pizza
Detroit
Hut,
style
Domino's.
pizza. Yeah.
I don't
Anyways.
think I've ever really had Detroit style pizza.
What about what is the chopped cheese? I wanted to try one of those when I was there. I've seen so many YouTube videos on chopped cheese, and I've never had
that. Is.
It's like hamburger meat with like American cheese cooked on a grill. Yeah.
Okay.
And then it's just put in I think it's a regular hamburger bun or something. It's supposed to be
like
like
a sloppy
the original.
Joe.
Yeah, it's like a bodega
Joe?
food. Yeah.
Okay.
Look it up. It's apparently they're really, and they look tasty.
Okay.
They look
I will
like,
look it up later. But for now,
hamburger helper.
Let's share our conversation with Seamus.
It's spicy, y'all. It's so spicy. It's like eating Mexican food. You take that first bite, and it's like really spicy, and then it's just you get used to it. And it's like, yeah.
I'm just gonna go out here and say I really enjoy spending time with Seamus. He is a super interesting, fascinating person, and fearless. And we talk about a lot of things, some of which are video games. So I hope you all.
Yeah. It gets interesting.
I hope you all
folks.
enjoy. Yeah, I hope you all enjoy the conversation. Here we go.
Are you a game developer or looking to become one? Consider joining the largest nonprofit professional group in the industry, the International Game Developers Association.
Do you know the IGDA chapter near you is probably hosting an event soon? And they're probably serving free pizza.
The IGDA supports game developers by providing mentorship, education, and advocacy for our craft.
Whoa, a discount on Dell computers and 75% off the Audio Hero sound effects library.
If you're as passionate about game development as we are, check out the IGDA. Visit igda.org/membership and use the code IGDA 4th Curtain 15 to get 15% off your membership.
Welcome to today's episode of The Fourth Curtain. Today we have a true wizard on the program. I was thinking about how to describe you, Seamus, and I think wizard is the right word, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. A physicist. Here's what I got off your Wikipedia. You worked at Fermilab. Did you really work at Fermilab?
Yeah, it was like being in a Nova show. It was awesome.
That's amazing. Worked on flight simulators, designed Trespasser. Hey, created the Xbox. What? Thank you for doing that. That changed my life profoundly.
Maybe a little bit.
Yeah. Hi, Seamus. It's Seamus Blackley, everybody.
Were you ever in the Bungie office, in your special office with your special carpet and your special offices at Microsoft? The first time that I came through to talk about Xbox, and like people, I thought I was going to be murdered. Do you like
what? Why?
Oh, come on. We were a very friendly and welcoming, warm bunch.
You absolutely were not. We were absolutely.
He starts it off with, Alex, you were a dick.
I think it's because. So people don't know the history. All right. So Bungie was a big Mac developer, right? That was your thing. You all were like, okay, all you assholes on the PC, we're from Chicago. So we're cooler than you because Second City North. And
we had two chips on our shoulder. We had Mac and Chicago.
Yeah, Mac guys. So we're not from New York and we're not on PC. Cool. All right. Fine. That's all fine. And then Microsoft acquires you. And I think Ed Freeze promises you can ship your new big game, Halo, which you total ripoff Ringworld, but it's okay. You can.
Dude, this guy's shots fired. Like
that on Mac, which is your dream, right? And look, dude, I was actually a fan of Bungie. I had played a lot of I'm blanking on the name now with the game
Marathon. You played Marathon.
Yeah, and the Marathon was cool. It was very tight. It was very clean and really good mechanics. Very fast. And a lot of people's very first, especially a lot of game developers' first introduction to online play, which is cool. And then I think what happened is, you can tell me, but I think what happened is, so we roll in, and me and, and variously Kevin or Otto or different guys started inviting ourselves to a party. And I knew Bill, or to meetings, and I knew Bill Gates because of Dreamworks, and the whole trespasser thing. And so suddenly Ed has this problem, because Ed's like pretty much newly minted guy running the games group, which has always lost money and always sort of been this weird, redheaded stepchild. He's trying to turn it around all the time. And he acquires Bungie, and this is a big deal, right? This is like the early version of the Activision acquisition, right? It's Bungie, you guys from Chicago, and you're going to move out, and you have a special building, and
not as many zeros. But,
yeah,
but
sure.
Okay, keep going.
Let's the rigmarole around getting you a special building, and the bitterness of other Microsoft employees about the fact that you guys had a special building was amazing. So, or a special, office and special rules. Like, you guys didn't have to do normal Microsoft employee shit, right?
Yeah.
To get you there, right? Because it's a little bit like, you have to work for Microsoft. It's like, you will join the board, here's your implant, and then these guys, they don't have to have implants, or they have like cherry flavored implants.
Yeah. That's like the definition of prima donna, right? We were the special ladies.
Yes, indeed, it was a busload of primas donna, and so then suddenly this Bill and different Microsoft executives like, hey, maybe we should make a big game console. We got these guys, and then Ed is like, Jesus Christ, Jesus fucking Christ. I just was trying to make a game business here. It's just starting to work, and now these assholes. And I remember we'd have meetings that it was basically just like that. And so I imagine in my mind, and you can tell me, that there was a meeting at some point, and Ed told the Bungie management, okay, we may have to support this stupid game console that's going to fail anyway. And so then I walk in after you guys have that in your minds, and I'm like, hey, there's like clown music playing in your mind. Game console guy. At that point, like, Microsoft being a game console was a joke in and of itself. And then on top of that, and so literally, like, it was like death stares from every single fucking Bungie employee, like death stares.
You know what? I so wish that was true, but no, we were just dicks.
All right, anyway, so you have questions? You got questions?
Questions? No, I mean, honestly,
I will never forget the carpet. You guys had the special corporate tile carpet. That was only Bungie carpet. I remember that.
Really? That was
what did it say?
I didn't even know we had special. It didn't say anything. Right? It was just different.
Go to any other Microsoft buildings? No, you didn't. That's why you don't know. Microsoft, it was like a prison camp. Okay, they were like they were dead baby seals on the floor.
Oh no,
that's what people ate.
Do you know? Between my junior and senior year of college, I interned at Microsoft, and I don't know if you. You must have known John Kimmick.
Yeah, I knew John.
Games Group.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, he was in my I interned on C7,
really nice,
which was like the first version of I think it was like pre-Visual Studio, first version of the C compiler that supported C++, and I was writing test code for C7 over on the main campus with John Kimmick. And then John Kimmick was like the first guy who came over to the Bungie office during due diligence when we were doing the deal. So it was like very odd, full circle-y odd. But honestly,
that's how these work out. They're you keep on meeting the same people in life. It's very interesting.
Yeah. I think the Japanese have an expression, like, we like to say life is short. I think they like to say life is long, and you always end up seeing the same people over and over again.
Maru.
But we picked up the phone to call Ed Freeze because of the Xbox. It wasn't like Ed twisting our arm on it. We went.
So then, why the hate? Why did I get those? It's just an outsider.
You know what?
Dude, I think it's really good that you guys are doing this right now on a podcast.
Seamus, it wasn't. It honestly, it had nothing to do with you. It was. Look, back in Chicago.
Unblock. Yes.
Back in Chicago, that we had a room. We had a room where we were making Myth. We had a room where we were making Halo.
You have a room where you're doing what?
Yeah. No. Myth.
Back in Chicago, we had a room.
We made Myth.
Myth.
Right.
With a Y.
That was the room.
door to yes.
Yeah,
the door to the myth room was
this is
open.
Spicy. I didn't expect this. The photographs.
No, this is what happens when the media training you had doesn't apply anymore, and you can just...
Yeah, that's right. That's right. This is the 30 years of pent up. All right, come on, I'm just getting it out.
I wanted to speak to you about this for so long.
No, but
it's like a going to war kind of thing. It's like the shit we saw, man.
But yeah, so yeah, it wasn't you. It was like in Chicago, you'd open up the door to the Halo room and peek your head in there, and you'd get the same stares. It was just an intensity.
Yeah,
intensity. Yeah.
Well, it was it was a big challenge because, like, along with the many other reasons that Xbox never should have happened, one of them was that our lead game was a shooter, which at the time was considered impossible on a console, right?
Right.
Yeah.
To die and kill everyone on that hill, because if you didn't have a mouse and a keyboard and you weren't sitting in front of a screen, you could never play a shooter. What are you, stupid, boy? What are you, stupid?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It worked though.
Except GoldenEye. GoldenEye was okay. GoldenEye was okay.
Yeah. Fun party game.
It was fun.
GoldenEye wasn't Aaron.
It was. Okay, hold on. The auto. Everyone always wanted to be the little guy. What's his name?
Okay,
the short guy.
Another direction.
Yeah.
Is the short guy in the secret room?
in the meth room. GoldenEye was okay. I didn't like the 4-player split screen where we played.
Oh, that's all we played was the 4-player split screen.
I didn't like it that much.
Split screen is the greatest. I mean, Halo is best on split screen too, because you can spy on what the other people are doing, and like. And if you,
I always thought I was looking at that TV, and I'm like, yeah, I should be looking what everybody else is doing, but I couldn't. I couldn't do it. I couldn't. Whatever.
My problem was
multitasking.
that I would look at that, and I demoed the game so much, and I mean, like, you guys demoed it more than me, but I had lots and lots of like high pucker factor demo moments. Like I gave the keynote at CES twice with Bill, and like one of them I demoed Halo, and I was like, really, it shouldn't crash. Really, it really shouldn't crash. MGM Arena with 38,000 people and live, like, national news.
Oh gosh. Did it crash? It didn't crash on you, did it?
No, but so I always look at the split screen and I'd be like, come on, NVIDIA, come on, NV10, don't tear, don't fuck up. Come on. Yeah, keep all 4 cameras going. Let's go. Because, when you know how that stuff works, when you actually know how the hardware works and you actually know how a graphics pipeline works, like everything you can't trust it. Like, you're sure it's going to fail. All you've seen is it fail.
Is that Murphy's Law?
No, it's just that you get... Like, when you spend 90% of your time watching something fail, and then it's supposedly fixed.
That's PTSD. That's what that is. Yeah. That's flashback. It's like,
that's what that's called. PTSD.
Yes, right, exactly. It's like, this has been working for a solid month now. It's fixed, but is anything ever really fixed?
I'm sure it's fixed. Yeah. Yeah, and then you see like some little thing, like a couple pixels in a Z fight, and you're like, fuck,
when you would do those,
it's gonna blow.
I know. Oh god. When you would do those, like the keynote and stuff, was Bill actually playing, or were you playing against 3 people in the back, or was it canned?
It was 3 people in the back. It was never canned because I never wanted to lie. That was important because I knew that that old Phil Harrison, shout out to Phil, they had some canned demos, and I didn't want to be Phil. I didn't, who wants to be that tall? And so everything was always right, and Bill would play. There was the only time that it was weird playing with Bill was in the Japan launch. And this is a really good story for programmers and like Microsoft guys. Everybody else, I apologize, you're not going to understand this joke, but just laugh and pretend, because then you'll seem cool, like Microsoft. We're in Japan, we're in Tokyo, we're in Shibuya, we're at the famous crossing where 1 million people cross a day, or however, whatever.
Oh yeah, that cool, yeah.
Yeah, and they're having the event. There's a big Starbucks that's like on the corner there, and the event was in there or the level above, and you could see the Shibuya station, you could see Hachiko and all this stuff across, and this big press event. And the culmination of it is that I'm going to play Dead or Alive with Bill as my opponent. Okay. And so Bill's really going to play. And so I'm like, okay, fine. And I think that came off. I don't remember that because I remember this instead, which was that in Japanese games of that time, and you don't see it so much anymore. On 2-player games or games where there is an option to play another player or play the computer, play the AI, the Japanese English version of that was com versus computer. P1P v com was like, you knew what that meant, right? Bill, of course, had no experience with this. And so for Bill, com meant a very specific library of technologies at Microsoft. And so Bill goes versus com because he was having to sign up. And I said, yeah, in Xbox 2, we'll use com plus. And because that was what they were trying to launch, that it was com plus. And if you know Microsoft, this will be funny to you. And Bill lost it and almost couldn't do the thing because
you got him. Laughing. You got him with the perfect nerd joke at the right moment.
Tremendous nerd joke.
And you were probably light on sleep going all the way over there. Nice work. So, what was Bill Gates an investor in Dreamworks? Is that, or how did?
So Bill Gates or Microsoft, can't remember which one, was an investor in Dreamworks or Dreamworks Interactive where I worked, and so he would come down and get demos when we were working on Trespass. Okay. I had this physics.
Is that how you first met him? Is it because he would come down for?
Okay. Yeah, I had this physics system going in 3D, and we had the sound hooked up to it, so there'd be like a dinosaur standing next to some water, and the water would be moving, and you could take a crate and push it down a slope, and it would roll and go boom, 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 and it hit the dinosaur, and he'd have to take a step to balance, and the crate would go in the water, and it would splash, and it would start bobbing up and down in the water. It was very, very cool. It was an extremely impressive demo, and we almost finished the game, and then we shipped it unfinished. But he was very impressed by that, and he at the time said, "You should definitely come work at Microsoft." And so when the debacle happened with Trespasser, I was like, Bill G at Microsoft.com. Hey, he called HR, and next thing they put me in an interview loop, and it was like, and again, you guys are not going to know these people, but it was like Todd Leaney and Mike Abrash.
Mike Abrash is a pretty big name. He spent time at id with Carmack, right?
Did you know? Do you know Todd L?
I don't think I know the name. I don't know the.
Yeah, so, and a couple others, like the guy who ran the program manager for Direct3D, and so I had this interview loop that was absolutely titanic. Abrash sat me down at a dumb terminal and made me just write C.
No pressure.
So not an editor, and then he just looked at it and he's like, "Okay," and I was like, "Is that it?" Yep. And then he came to work on Xbox, and I remember at the time, because he was such a big figure, that I got a call, and I was in my girlfriend at the time. I was in her sister's garage in Connecticut or in New York, and upstate New York, and I was freezing in this garage, and my phone rings, and it's a number I don't recognize. I pick it up, and it's Mike Abrash. And he asks if he can work for Xbox. He went, "Can I come work for you?" And I was like, "I don't understand, Mike, the connection between work for and me. Could you say that again? Because that was amazing."
Wait, we're kind of going backwards here. So where did it all start? We're in the middle. Where?
Well, I guess I think my mom looked a lot like Shirley MacLaine when she was young, and my dad found that really hot. And so,
no, not that far back. Oh. No, okay. So wait, just out of curiosity,
what?
Alex asked this question. Alex.
Actually, what I want to know is what was your high school like? Where'd you grow up? Did you have a intellectual and technologically rich youth when you grew up? Was there? Do you have a computer in the house? Were your parents I imagine your parents were scientist professors?
Yeah, see, this is a better way to ask the question. How'd you get into the whole thing?
If you want to, I'll tell you too much. I had an incredibly abusive childhood. It was incredibly terrifying. And what happened was my high school had a computer, digital PDP-11, 34, and then 74. And it saved my life. I was able to escape into that.
Okay. And so technology really rescued you.
Yeah, absolutely. And games happened because I went into the computer and I figured out how it worked, and I hacked more and more into it, and I learned that I need to be very quiet about it. We wrote our own email system. We wrote computer viruses because we read about these things in Scientific American.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Oh, electronic mail, and we're like, oh, maybe we should try writing that. And so we wrote it, and it was a place to escape it. And then games, obviously everyone played arcade games, but it became obvious at some point that the games was a way to explicitly escape into the machine, into a world of the making that you could actually draw other people into. So we all made tons of games and animation, and that's just how it happened, you know. And it was great. It was all encompassing, and unlike the world that I couldn't control, like when you're abused as a child, you learn that the reality is beyond your control. And this is what causes people to have a lot of really bad behaviors in life, substance abuse, everything else, because there's no consequence to your actions that's controllable. So therefore, who the fuck cares what you do? And this is very obvious to me. And I think it's probably not so obvious to people who had different childhoods, but that's where it comes from. And the thing about the computer that was really lucky for me is that it was a place where the consequences of your actions were absolutely programmatically clear and controllable. You could completely control everything. And if there's a problem, you could fix it. And then I noticed that, you know, sometimes the computer would have a problem, and the guy who ran the computer, Dave Glidden, we called Doc, he would fix it. And then we spied on him fixing it. Then we learned how to fix it. Then we learned how to get into the protected areas of the system. And then we, you know, went in there and saw them. And there's that interesting story there too, which is that another guy went to my high school is called Marty Chavez, and he was the first Latino CTO and then CEO of a major bank at Goldman Sachs. He's a super brilliant guy.
Was he the we that you're talking about?
He was he was like 2 years ahead of me. And so I finally got into like the bowels of this system of this you know, digital computer, and it was a timeshare system. So, you know, it was a kind of a security challenge. And I got in there and I saw he'd already been there. He wrote a tribute to himself, like I, R. Martin Chavez.
That's so good. That's like writing your name on the sheet.
Yeah, no,
on the sheet, you know,
he beat you. But that must have been fuel. That must have been fuel, inspiration for you.
Yeah, and he'd already like graduated at the time, so it was pretty frustrating. I couldn't even go beat him up. You got to remember at the time, like if you showed up with a floppy disk in your and it was 8-inch floppies at the time, so we'd like hide them in our notebooks because that was a time where being a nerd was not cool. I mean, and it's hard for people to imagine, I think, at this time. But you can have your ass kicked. I got a tooth broken out because I was good at math. Yeah, that's how the world was. That's just what it was like. And so it's a big reversal right now. Yeah. It's a big reversal. The technical people are cool. It was not like in the 80s. It was not like that.
Yeah, Nerds came out in the 80s.
But you mean the movie, right? Not the candy.
That movie? Yeah. The movie
Revenge
Nerds.
of the Nerds.
Yeah.
That's right.
Revenge of the Nerds. That's what it was. Yeah.
Yeah, and the whole premise of Revenge of the Nerds was anybody who had any technical ability at all was uncool. Mm-hmm. And the movie was interesting because they suddenly got a girlfriend. And that was enough for an entire commercial motion picture.
Well, yeah. The nerds get the girls and the money now, I guess.
And I feel like, you know, it goes too far. I mean, I'm watching the trial of the FTX guy, and it's like, wow.
Oh,
you know?
Right.
Like maybe we've gone a little far.
A little too far.
So thank you for sharing that story. I did not know that. But I wonder.
Yeah. Thanks.
I mean, I from talking to you, you know, from back in the day, and we caught up recently. You've done things that I think most people wouldn't even think of doing or think they could. Like you wrote your own email system back in the day. You like convinced the company to make a game console. You've started you were like the first agent for video game representation. You seem fearless in terms of pursuing your own ideas, I guess.
There's plenty of video game agents before me, so I should just be clear about that. But I wanted to go and figure out the funding model in games, because one of the things that happened was, you know, Kevin Backus got, can't remember who it was, to agree that we'd have like a $20 million slush fund to basically bribe developers to have Xbox exclusives, because we knew that's how Sony did it, and Nintendo just owned everybody. And Sega did it that way. They'd like buy studios or just pay them off to be exclusive, because you have to, especially if it's a new platform. They could ship on PlayStation, and if it was a hit game, make a lot of money. So to get somebody to give you an exclusive, and I don't think a lot of gamers know this, even though it seems really obvious, You bribe them. You give them an amount of money that's kind of like the amount of money they might earn from a hit game on an established platform. And then it's good business for them and all their employees who had houses and children and families and need to eat, to take a bet on your platform, which might fail and get them nothing, but then they still have the money in the bank, right? Okay, that's how it works. We got a fund from Microsoft for that, which was very difficult to do because Microsoft's not an entertainment company, didn't understand this, wasn't even really sure about games, blah, 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 blah. And at that time, it was still shocking to people, shocking that a video game could make millions. What? So this was the uphill battle, but he got it allocated, but could never spend it. And it was frustrating. And during that and subsequently, you know, looking at, you know, dealing with P&L stuff at Microsoft, I learned about business. And I realized that the problem that was preventing people from making innovative new games was not a lack of ideas or technology, because we delivered the technology. It was a lack of funding mechanisms for taking a risk. And I had read a book about this time in the movie industry when accidentally a guy who really knew about movies, had been an actor, Bob Evans, got in charge of a studio at Paramount that was owned by a big conglomerate, by Gulf and Western, and they wouldn't fund any of the films that he wanted to make. Because and the movie industry was in this huge slump, and when industry is in a huge slump, they just want to do sure things, right? Yeah. And the video game business has been in this place a lot of times. And around 2002 and 2003, when I left Microsoft, same thing was happening. So you get more derivative content, and the audience is less and less happy because the audience wants new content. But if you're an executive and you have P&L responsibility, and you're worried about keeping your job, getting a review, and getting a good bonus, you don't want to take big risks that might fail, especially when there's a downturn. So you have this situation that is like a negative feedback loop for pulling the industry out. And so I thought, wow, what am I going to do? And I read this book, and what Robert Evans did at that time in the same situation was he figured out how to do something called structured financing for movies, and basically using bank debt and getting other people and groups of other people to take a small amount of risk on a project that had distribution from a major studio and had access to like the talent that a major studio can bring, but the studio didn't have to finance it, just distribute it and take profits. And it worked. It was a business model that worked. And we got Rosemary's Baby and
Star Wars
and Easy Rider. No, Star Wars would never have happened if these hadn't happened first in the early 70s.
That's what I'm saying. That's how Lucas did it, right?
It rebooted the whole thing. Yeah. And Lucas did it because Lucas didn't do it, his business guys did it. But and you know, E.T. was financed with structured finance. Harold Brown, my really good friend who I met through this, did structured finance for E.T. And he has a great story about how he got the deal all closed, and you have all these banks and insurance companies. It's a very complicated deal, and the studio and distribution rights, and it's hundreds of pages of documents and 50 signatures and all this shit. Got it done. And then Steven comes back to him and says, okay, so I need, an additional such and such amount of money because I want to have E.T.'s head go up and down. And Harold was like, oh, God damn it, I just closed everything. So we figured out how to do this for games, and that's really what I was doing as an agent, was bringing that model to games. And as a side benefit of that, when you do that, the developer can keep the IP, or a large part of the IP, because it's being financed by organizations that don't want the IP. Like a bank doesn't want to own your IP. They might have rights to it if you screw up, but they don't actually want to own it. And that's a big deal for creative people. That's a huge deal. Like if you have the opportunity to work on something where, even if you don't have 100% of control of the profits, but at least you have 100% control creatively and it belongs to you and your name is always associated with it, you're always going to choose that. That makes you feel it's just dignity and respect thing. So that's what I was doing. Anyway, that's a much longer answer than you wanted.
Was that at CAA, or was that the company you started before that? Did it morph into it?
Yeah, I started a company before that, and I got kind of recruited out of there because I talked to a bunch of financiers, and they in CAA knew those guys, and started getting calls from CAA. I had no idea what this creative artist agency was. I mean, it's this huge big deal in Beverly Hills. It's a super famous thing. And, being a physicist and game guy, I was like, who is this? And these really famous, agents were calling me who were like epically famous in the film business. Like people who sit in the front row at the Oscars were like calling me, and I was kind of blowing them off.
Is that model still around or no?
No, I stopped doing that. It kind of stopped happening. And the industry kind of turned around a little bit too. I mean, the indie movement came up, and this idea that developers wouldn't work on stuff unless they had some kind of ownership. It was changed. I mean, you know this, Alex. I mean, you remember how it was and how it is now. It's much better for developers now, just because the world's changed. And also, the other thing is that developers are different now. So when I started out, to be a game developer, you had to be a super nerd. You had to really, really, really understand the basics of everything. And so you had a demographic of people as game developers who were way more like shoe-staring nerd types, like guys who did not have a lot of social skills or a lot of business acumen, because you just had to be focused on other stuff. And now, the state of the world is the tools are much better. And so you get people who with a much broader background, like people who do have business acumen, people who are like, can be more just freely creative and not have to be super nerds, who are running these studios, and they're much more adept at business and able to do stuff we never would have thought of doing.
So how long were you at CAA for?
10 years.
Wow. 10 years. I have seen many folks kind of come in and out of games from other parts of entertainment. You must have more experience with that than probably most people.
Well, the thing that the interesting pattern that always used to happen then and may still happen now was you'll get somebody who can't find a job or get a good enough job in games. And it will suddenly occur to them to go and represent themselves to movie people as an expert in games. And then they'll get hired to like run this whole big games group at like a movie studio or at a production company. People in the games industry was like, how the fuck did this guy get that job? And it's because they could go and tell the movie people, I did this. And they don't know how to check. And so then you get these people, and I mean, it's not always the case, but it's definitely the case. There's some people who are like, you're like, wow, that person should not be in that job. And then the same thing is true conversely. You have movie people going into the game business representing themselves as being these like an enormous creative people, because like, and a lot of times it's people who like had poisoned their career in the film business and can't get a job. But in games, well, he will now become the studio creative director for our publisher for the Los Angeles, and film people are like, oh my God, this guy, how did this guy get that job? Fuck him.
Dude, I got to get that job.
And so I saw a lot of that, and it was kind of hilarious to see. And so I was trying to stop.
Thanks for the idea, Seamus. I'm gonna call out the studio.
Yeah, go pitch yourself to the film people. Be like, I should really run.
Karen, you have a job.
So wait, physicist. I want to know about that. So is that what you studied? Did you go to university?
Yeah.
I don't trust. Yeah. Where did you go?
You don't trust what?
The wiki.
Oh, right. Yeah, no. So I studied theoretical high energy physics, particle physics, and that's how I ended up working at Fermilab, which was a particle accelerator. It used to be the world's most powerful particle accelerator. And then the United States was building an even more powerful particle accelerator in a place called Waxahachie, Texas.
Oh, yeah.
It was called Superconducting Collider, the SSC. And they started it. The tunnels are there. And then Congress canceled it. And I had a postdoc lined up to work at this SSC, which was like the coolest thing going. And I was kind of dreading moving to Texas. And they canceled it, and that was it. And
come on, Seamus. It's nice out here.
You know Waxahachie?
No, not Waxahachie.
Is Waxahachie like in the middle of, or is that like Western
That's
Texas?
like CERN, right?
Yeah, so this shows the difference between European thinking and American thinking, right? Americans think, okay, and our political system at that time, and still probably is set up so that you want to build this huge particle accelerator. Let's put it in the most desolate, shitty place ever, right? As if the quality of life of the people who work at this place is not.
But it might cause like a black hole or something, right? You got to put it.
My friend works at one in Germany, actually, the little one in Hamburg.
Oh, does he?
Yeah, and then he I think he started going to CERN now.
Yeah, so CERN is in Switzerland, in Geneva. You look at people's social media feeds as physicists there, it's great. And that's a big difference. And they get all this amazing work done. Anyway, we sort of seeded the future of fundamental physics to Europe through that. And it was pretty depressing. And I accidentally, got into games. And I've been writing games since I was a kid. And so I thought I'll do this for a minute. And then it was more than a minute.
Were you at Looking Glass for a while?
Yes.
Man,
oh yes.
So such a densely.
I was one of the founders of Looking Glass.
You were one of the founders of Looking Glass?
Yeah.
It's such a dense pocket of talent.
It was. It didn't seem crazy at the time, but yeah, it was. It was crazy, and we definitely, you know, there was this other guy, John, who was writing 3D, who was writing texture mappers in Texas, and so we get on ARPANET with John.
You talking about Carmack?
We have these conversations like, okay, so if we got one triangle that's in front of another one, like how do we set up a database so we can quickly know which is it? But these debates, like, okay, well, you could do it like this, and you could hash it, or you could make it like this. And then clipping, and then we were like, oh shit, like it makes more triangles and you start with, so you have to have space. What if it's too many triangles? All this whole thing. That's nobody thinks about anymore. Yeah. And we were thinking about it kind of for the first time. People had done this before, but not in real time on the PC with texture mapping. And how do you change the texture map coordinates?
Ultima Underworld? Was that like the first?
Ultima Underworld, yeah. And it came out and it got destroyed commercially by Castle Wolfenstein 3D. But you know, we had a free camera. You could like tilt and roll the camera all around the place because we were nerds. And we had this complicated gameplay where you could talk to NPCs and all this stuff. And then we did Ultima Underworld 2 and then System Shock, which then had a physics system put in the 3D world. And yeah, it was pretty advanced. And we were just basically making it for ourselves. Good times. Ken Levine showed up, and he was one of those guys from Hollywood who was like, hey, yes, I'm a writer, and I drive a BMW. And we're like, whoa.
Well, no, he didn't drive a BMW, did he
drive a BMW?
Back then? I mean, because we talked to him. He was
on the show, by the way.
Yeah, and he struggled for a while before he found you guys.
Yeah, well, you know, he found his thing. You know, he was like all of us when you were young, you know, he was like, yes, I'm a big Hollywood deal guy, but you know, really he was struggling, and it's just how it is. But he suddenly was in the right spot with the right group of people, and we had developed the technology to the point, like with System Shock and System Shock 2 and all these other games, that somebody without a big technical background could suddenly like actually drive stuff, which hadn't been the case like a minute before that. Like 30 seconds before that, it would have been too early. And then boom, he showed up, and then he kept on doing shock and shock and shock.
shock and shock and shock.
It was.
And so you at some point you went from there to you started DreamWorks Interactive.
Yeah, that was right at the same time. So Ken showed up when I was out the door, and it was because the game that really sustained Looking Glass was Flight Unlimited that made money, and so they, you know, and I wanted to make a sequel to that had combat in it. And I hired all these, you know, Air Force pilots, and we were working on it. I went to Air Force Combat Command, and I, you know, and I was a pilot at the time. So, you know, I flew in an F-16, I flew in the simulators, I went to like, you know, lift, lead-in fighter training. And you'll appreciate this now. As a young guy, I was amazed by this, but now it's such a common story. I think that game made Looking Glass like $20 million or something or more, which was a lot at the time. It had, you know, 1 million copies or something. It was a big deal for them. It sold more than all the other games combined times 10, right? As beautiful as those games are. And I was like, okay, so now we're gonna triple that number. We're gonna do combat, which is what everybody wants, and you know, we're gonna do jets, and we'll figure this out. And the investors in Looking Glass were like, oh, well, this company is now successful, so we're going to bring in new management. And so they brought in a guy, and you know, with no games experience at all. And this was a guy who claimed he had invented IP, Internet Protocol.
Al Gore. You guys hired Al Gore.
I invented the internet. I was thinking the same thing.
I can't even remember his name, but I remember having these conversations with him where I was like, you know, so his idea was, no, you need to do a sequel right away that's just like it, but has a few more features. And I was like, no, like I'm in the demographic for this. I know why it sold. Like we need to like continue to deliver something amazing and new, and they just wouldn't do it. And so eventually I made them fire me. And I remember it was this terrible day at Looking Glass, and I left, and you know, I got a job offer from Steven Spielberg. So yeah, fuck you. Here we go. And then amazingly, like I crashed that ship. Woof.
Well, did they do a sequel to Flight Unlimited?
They did. And what they did was, so Microsoft Flight Simulator was like the biggest selling game at the time, right?
Yeah.
It was, and we beat it pretty badly. And then this guy who'd come in, you know, predictably, and I don't want to talk negatively about anybody, but the team at Looking Glass really split into two. There was like the System Shock guys and Doug Church who kept on pushing because they didn't have this guy saying you need to make a sequel. And then they found this new manager found all the people inside who were willing to just pimp out a sequel, and they made they made the sequel like that started to copy Flight Simulator features. So it was like Flight Unlimited had beat Flight Simulator by doing everything it couldn't do, like totally aerobatic, give you the feeling of flying, all the stuff that Flight Simulator is terrible at the time. And then this decision, which is a typical bad investor decision, is okay. Well, now that we've beat it, we need to like get all its features. And it's like, you know, just a terrible idea. So yeah, it was a failure.
Huh. So it's so weird.
Yeah, really weird.
Are you still a pilot?
No, you know, I am a lapsed pilot,
now?
but I'm thinking of getting back into it. I started getting into hang gliding right before the pandemic, and I shut that down.
What?
Well, I really like flying a lot, but I quit when my son was born. I had a Ducati race bike that I rode around, and Alex, I don't know, you probably never saw me on that, but that's what I rode to work.
Huh.
Like Tom Cruise, pilot, Ducati.
I had this weird thing that I was doing our corporate taxes, and I wanted to I was e-signing them. And when you e-sign your taxes, the IRS requires one of these authentication services to run before you're allowed to e-sign, right? So it asks you like, which of these addresses did you live at? And you have to click on the one, like, you know. And one of them was, which of these vehicles did you own? And it was like 2000 Ducati, 719R. And I was like, missed that bike. Fuck. And so I went to my wife and I was like, oh God, look at this horrible question it asked me. It reminded me I used to be cool. That she was like, you can't have a motorcycle.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I used to ride that bike to go skydiving at this place called Kapowsin, which is a really great skydiving place in Washington State. And so that Seamus who would ride a motorcycle to go skydiving, that Seamus.
You were truly the coolest person. Or were. Let's say you were.
Yeah, I was. But I felt like an asshole. I felt like a loser.
All right. Well, you have some interesting hobbies too.
Baking bread was one, apparently, right?
That's like one of the most common things humans hit.
No, not too many people make bread. My wife makes bread every day.
Historically, it's like probably the most boring and common thing a human being.
Here's just another. When I was kind of poking at that thread about how you do things that most other people they might think of or whatever, but they wouldn't actually think they could do it. You don't just bake bread. You don't just bake bread.
I do just bake bread.
You're baking like You're baking bread from like ancient source yeast, or dug out of like Egyptian pyramids or something.
Oh.
Sure, that's how you do it, right?
Where do you get the idea for that?
Really? That's awesome. I didn't know that.
Well, so I like a lot of tech guys, do sourdough, right? So I was
during the you were doing this before the pandemic, I'm guessing.
Oh yeah, the pandemic was kind of
because during the pandemic, I was baking bread. Everybody was
during
baking
the pandemic.
Bread.
Not everybody. It's like 4 people.
And I had I had quite a thing on Twitter of helping people do sourdough baking during the pandemic, to the point that there's one tweet that I almost made into a shirt that was the King Arthur Baking Company. Their social media.
King Arthur, that's a
said that I was personally responsible for the flour shortage. Remember the flour shortage? Yeah.
Yes, I remember that.
Because you're big, yeah. So that was pretty good. So I got really into trying. I got it into my head to try baking bread like historical people had. So if I was like a peasant in Poland in 1350, right, and I had a bag of grain, like how could I make bread? And it would be sourdough, which is just means like wild yeast, right? Because it's in the air, it's everywhere, it's in your car tires. Okay, this yeast, and so I was like, all right, well, I practice this. So I learned how to like mill grain into flour, and I learned about all that, and I taught myself over a period of 3 or 4 years how to take a bag of grain and make it with water and salt into passable bread, and then into really good bread. And it takes a ridiculous amount of work. It's not easy to do that. And people say, oh, I made whole wheat bread. And what they mean is they have like 20% whole wheat flour they bought in the supermarket that has like all the husks and stuff extracted from it. But if you actually take grain and you have wholemeal, like all of it in there, and you mill it on stone, like people have done all the way up until basically the middle of the 18th century. It takes a lot of skill to make a loaf of bread that's fluffy and that you can eat. But if you do it, it turns out to be really great. So, okay, I'm doing this dumb thing, and I realized you can make...
It's not dumb.
No,
come on.
I realized you could collect yeast from different places, and the bread would taste different because the yeast turns out to be, like in beer, one of the most important flavor characteristics. So I would go collect yeast different places, and it was pretty fun, like on hikes, and then when I would travel places. And now I have this big collection. I have yeast from the Imperial Palace in Japan, and I have yeast from like medieval forests in England, and all these different places. It lasts forever if you propagate it properly.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Okay. So it's all the different flavors. So my wife is amazing. I have this second refrigerator just full of jars of yeast.
Yes.
All right. So then one day, my friend Mark, who I knew from Sierra Online, that old school game producer, he had transitioned from the game industry to being, and he's still a very famous brewer. He won every award there is. And he'd make Belgian-style ale with wild yeast. But he got his hands on a yeast sample that was ostensibly from ancient Egypt. And, the beer guys had made a bunch of, beers with it, like, Raw's Revenge and all these fucking stupid...
Raw's Revenge.
So he was like, hey, you want to try this for your baking? So he sent it to me. And I tried baking with it. And I looked up, on the internet, like, what kind of grain did the Egyptians use? They used emmer. I'm like, emmer, that's weird. Because, emmer is used for like warm salads now. If you look at a farro also, right? The reason it's called farro, used in warm salads, is because it was cultivated in Italy during the Roman Empire. And it actually was the grain that made the bread that fed the Roman army, which is amazing. And why did they have it? Well, they had it because it was used in Egypt, and they got all their technology from ancient Egypt. So, okay, great. So now this thing, which, was the grain that was cultivated by the two great early societies that shaped Western culture, is now used in a warm salad. Okay, fuck you, fine, but fine. So I tried it and made bread, and I'd been posting, bread on Twitter for a while just for fun. I had this thing, Flower Report, a hashtag to kind of make fun of the FLOWER report, people who would post pictures of flowers. I had FLOUR report, I thought I was clever.
It's clever.
That's so Instagrammy. I love it.
And I was like, but something about ancient Egypt, and I talked a little bit of the history, and this thing got like 1 million likes, and I was like, holy crap! But it got a ton of anger too from people who realized that I didn't know what the hell I was talking about. Like, where did this yeast come from? There's no way it's ancient. You're an idiot. This is from biologists. And then the Egyptian guys. And I could read and write hieroglyphs for a long time. It was one of the things I studied in college. And but the Egyptology community was like, you're an idiot. That's not how they bake bread. In the Old Kingdom, you're talking about where this yeast is from. They were baking before the invention of the oven. So you're just an asshole. Like, you don't even know what you're talking about. So I was like, all right. And I was like really bummed. And I was like, gosh, I told my wife, who's amazing, in case you couldn't tell already, I said, I'm really bummed because these people are being dicks to me. And my wife says, they're not being dicks. They're just telling you you're an idiot. Like, you're an idiot. Why aren't you learn? And so I contacted the loudest of these people and said, okay, well, how would we do it? And instantly we had this little group. And so we devised a way to actually collect dormant yeast and bacteria cultures from Old Kingdom baking and brewing vessels. And we went around to museums and did this and got samples and did DNA analysis, and they're in fact ancient. And then I worked with them to read papers and to figure out how bakeries ran in the Old Kingdom. And the bakeries in the Old Kingdom were amazing. The pyramid work crews, and there were between 10 and 20,000 people on any given day in the off season working on the pyramid, on the Great Pyramid and Khufu's pyramid. They were fed bread. And the bread was made in these giant football field-sized bakeries, that had no ovens in them. They had a different way of baking that's very efficient. The Egyptians were brilliant. They were very efficient. And they had a very well-developed technology for this. And so I taught myself how to do that. I found potters. I built these vessels. I set up an Old Kingdom bakery in my backyard. And
that's cool.
This went on, and now I'm actually working with the Egyptian government to recreate one of these Old Kingdom bakeries on the Giza Plateau next to the pyramids.
It is insane.
Well, see, it's not dumb. You said it was dumb. It's not. That's like way beyond.
It's very nerdy, and it's been put on hold by the war, but it's it's going.
Yeah, I love that as a way to learn and get in touch with history, because you get bread at the end.
Well, that's the thing.
You can eat it.
The reason that it was so popular was that it's something we can all connect to, and the bread itself is just exceptionally good, and it's cool because it comes in a conical shape. Their bread was conical.
Huh?
And what is conical? What does that mean?
Like a cone? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. What about the grain? I saw this thing where they found an old tomb that had like seeds of squash or something.
Yeah.
And they were able to grow these seeds again, like with this.
Well, the emmer grain, the emmer grain, you can get the heirloom emmer is the same genome as it was. So you do that, and it's the same thing with the yeast. We get a few yeast cells and they replicate, so you can have as much as you want. And that's kind of how we did it. But the great thing is that we can make this bread now, and you can eat it, and it's. As far as I can tell, and we've been very careful about everything, exactly the food that the guys who built and designed the pyramid would have eaten. The architect and the construction overseer of the Great Pyramid of Khufu is this. We have a statue, and they found his tomb, and there was pictures of bread and stuff in it. And he looks like a nerd. He's like a big nerdy architect. He's a big guy. And so you can essentially share a meal with this guy, and you can also read his life story, because it's preserved. You can hear what's in their minds. You can eat with them, and these are the people to whom we owe civilization. I mean, they did the first stone architecture, first bureaucracy, first everything, and
didn't they invent beer too or something?
Well, I mean, it's hard to say who invented beer or bread, but they were the first people in history to actually institutionalize it and to make it in large scales, and they had quality standards for beer and bread. They had sizing, so if you got a loaf of bread, it was always the same size. It was like a unit of currency. Same thing for bread. Quality standards, schedules, a whole economy and bureaucracy around this. They were very well organized. They were like the French, the ancient Egyptians. They loved their bureaucracy. It's irritating to me. People are like, oh, the pyramids were built by aliens, and it's insulting.
Yeah, let's go there. Come on.
B, we actually have the pay records from the Giza Plateau.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't know
go to the Metropolitan Museum and see Henniemu's crew was paid more than our crew, and we know it's because his sister is dating the overseer.
That's awesome. It's like super duper practical, just
absolutely, just because they were just people and they're doing the same, but they were really psyched. I mean, look, the Great Pyramid, Khufu's pyramid, Khufu's dad, Senefru, figured out how to build large pyramids. There's a series of pyramids that fell apart and didn't work that his dad built, and his father finally slightly smaller than him and got it right. And you can see the architectural changes. Like you can go into, there's this thing called the Bent Pyramid, which has all these huge timbers they had to import at great expense from Lebanon, because there's no trees that grow natively in Egypt. So they had this big trade network going on ships, and they have it sort of like propped open inside because it was collapsing inside. And, because nobody had ever built anything big out of stone before. I mean, there are rooms in these pyramids that were the biggest internal rooms in the world that had ever been made by anyone ever at the time. And you can stand in them. And so Khufu gets it, and this guy, and Senefru's architect, who's another guy called Imhotep, who we know. And we know what he looks like. We know about him. We read his writing. He wrote a medical papyrus that was the first.
So did you know all of this Egyptian history going into it, or did you learn it as you were?
I knew some of it, but being able to read hieroglyphs, being able to read Old and Middle Kingdom hieroglyphs, and some hieratic, which is the script version, is very helpful because you can read this stuff yourself. And yeah, and it's kind of incredible. And then going and see it and understanding what it means. So anyway, what I was going to say about the aliens was you can see the way that human beings figured out how to do this, and it's an incredible achievement. And it really pisses me off. I feel like, don't take that away from those people. Fuck you and your aliens.
Fuck you. That should be a t-shirt.
You can go and you can read the story of the people who built up the fleet of boats to move blocks. You can read the story of the guy who built the artificial harbor. There's an artificial harbor on the Giza Plateau where the boats could come with the stone blocks from the Nile up right next to the pyramid
and get close to the building site. Yeah.
And he talked about his great accomplishment at his tomb and how proud he was and how generations would know him and his children were proud. And I'm reading about this guy and it makes me sad. I want to cry when people say it was aliens because no, this guy was an incredible person. Look at what he did. And you're going to just remove this from him because you're an idiot?
Well, it's a business, right? Like they're making money off of the alien stuff.
Yeah, no, but so was his business. He was making money off the government. It was a public works project. Right? That's really funny and cool. And I want to know this guy, right? Like he figured out it was like having like the trash concession in New Jersey. Or this guy's like hauling blocks. I think that's hilarious. That's a way better story than aliens.
Yeah, I wonder how does that get out? Because like this is stuff I've never heard. Everything you said.
Well, it's all just there. I think it's because people have a thing called temporal bias, which is we are the only smart humans because we have iPhones and jets.
Yeah.
It's like, no, we're not. Really not. Like, just because they didn't have jets didn't mean they weren't smart. And that causes you to look at history through a lens, which is ridiculous. People either aggrandize history or trivialize it. And they don't get in the middle and see the people. And the amazing thing about ancient Egypt is that it's so long ago, 5,000 years, right? It's before everything. And yet you can read exactly what was on their minds. You can read poetry. You can read stories about the pharaohs. This is a tremendous story about Senefru, about Khufu's dad, that he was bored in the palace one day, and his vizier, the president, came to him and said, why you look sad and bored? You should go out in the lake. The pharaohs always had a ceremonial lake for functions. So go out in the lake in your boat, and I'll get some palace girls and we'll put them in fishnet dresses, and they'll row you around. And we have these fishnet dresses. Okay, so these like basically naked girls rowing them around, and it'll cheer you up.
Well, that's
okay. So he sends them out there. And this is Snefru. This is God on earth. Okay. This is and none of that, but Snefru was like the most favorite of all the pharaohs. Like when Ramses, like the Ramses II, the Great, was like pharaoh, 1,500 years after this, he would say, and by the way, in the biblical pharaoh, when he was pharaoh, the pyramids were already over 1,000 years old when he was pharaoh. It's hard to imagine that, but when people say, I'm doing a great accomplishment, written in stone, you can read, not since the time of Senefru has people done this, what they would say, thousands of years after Senefru. So this is the big guy. So he's trying to figure out how to build these pyramids, and they're falling apart and failing, but he keeps trying, right? And he's got this guy in Imhotep, who was horribly represented in all these mummy movies, but Imhotep might have been the first like Isaac Newton type person. Okay, he was a physician. He was an architect.
Oh, he's in the Mummy.
He was the main. Yeah. So Imhotep was another really famous guy in ancient Egypt, and I think he was like a Stephen Hawking kind of a guy. He was an incredible person, and so Imhotep kept on trying all these different things, and he was training this young guy who would then become the guy who built the big pyramid for Senefru's son. And in that guy's tomb, it says, "I was trained by the great Imhotep. I knew him. He knew my name. He knew my face." He was very proud of it. It's amazing. Yeah. He knew my face. Imhotep knew my face. That's a beautiful thing to say, right? So Senefru's rowing around, and suddenly one of the girls stops rowing, and she's crying, and he goes over and he says, "What's wrong?" And she says, "My turquoise dolphin pendant, it fell off my neck and fell into the water." And the pharaoh says, "Okay, well, we'll get you another one. It's all right. I'll get you another one." And she says, "No." Okay, so you learn about Senefru that he was a god on earth. In Egypt, he was the ruler of the entire known world at the time. There was no human known to their civilization who was not under his rule, period. And the slave girl or the palace girl or whatever, she says no to him. That says something about this guy, right? He's a guy you could say no to. And so she says, "I want my pendant." So, okay. So he calls his magician over, and the magician parts the waters. And it literally says he parts the waters. And on a rock is her pendant, and they get it, and she's happy, and the story ends. But this is parting the waters. Again, it's 1,500 years before the Moses story. right? A part of the water, and it uses those words. By the way, Moses means he is made. It's an Egyptian word. It's an Egyptian name, not a.
He was Egyptian too, right? Didn't he like murder an Egyptian as well?
Well, I mean that's the story, but the Bible is a collection of stories that actually have precedent, right? You know, a lot of the stuff in it comes from earlier stories that we have. Anyway, so it's incredible that you can read these things about these people. You can read their inner thoughts. You know, there are papyruses that have the philosophical papyruses. There's a great one, like a fight. You know, a man fighting his soul, and he wants to commit suicide because things are so bad, and his soul is telling him, no, if you commit suicide, I will not honor you in the afterlife. I will not do all these things for you. You must not kill yourself. And he has this debate with himself. He writes it down in a papyrus about, you know, a man versus his soul. So you can read this, and it's very powerful. And again, it really brings it home. These were like deep and cool people, you know, really, really cool people.
You are an Egyptologist.
Yeah, we got here from bread.
Yeah, well,
we got to the story of
and I love you guys, but I actually need to go because I have this day job.
Okay. Well, we've kept you for over an hour. Seamus, thank you so much for spending the morning with us. It was great to catch up.
Alex, it's so nice to see you, man. Like, you know, we do a lot together and did a lot of things that are much harder than they seem in retrospect, right? And I'm really proud of that. And I'm proud to know you and proud to be your friend.
Likewise. Thank you so much.
What about me, Seamus? What the heck? I'm like right here. I'm right here, dude.
Whatever, man. I met you 10 minutes ago.
I know. I'm just nice meeting you.
All right. We'll see you around. Well, that was interesting.
Right. It was the best.
It's never boring chatting with Seamus. And I got to say, just a reminder of being fearless, I guess. I kind of said it
unedited,
before we
unedited podcast.
And I was trying to pull this thread out a little bit with him, but like, you know, he was talking about in high school, I guess, or high school or college. I think it was high school.
It was high school. High school where he was on the computer.
Yeah, it was like hacking computers and doing things that nobody before him had done, you know, and same with his work in physics, and then same with Xbox, you know. It's like he didn't ask permission. I mean, I guess he had to ask permission to get the budget, but it's like he wasn't following anybody's lead, you know. He was coming up with stuff and leading.
Oh, I know what you mean by ask for permission.
Interesting.
Yeah. There's like even this podcast, right? Like we're doing it because other people have done it and it's okay. Like, you know, the whole podcast movement, it kind of like came onto the scene. Like that kind of thing, like that kind of permission, like, oh, it as opposed, is that what you mean?
I guess so.
You're making faces. You can't see his face.
Now you're making me feel not as great. But yeah, no, I think
you know what I mean. That's what I mean. Yeah, it's that works. There's two ways of there's digging into.
Yeah, I mean, if you're super original and you're doing things nobody else has ever done, sometimes you catch fire, you know, in a good way. You know, it's like, oh wow, this is really amazing.
Yeah,
and I think the Xbox has developed into that. And I think, in Seamus's words, I think he would say Trespasser could have been that, but ended up not being that. You know, and so sometimes you take chances and they work really well. Sometimes I suppose.
Okay, blah, 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 blah. I really liked... No, not like blah, 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 like what you're saying.
Oh, wow.
It's like rude. That was super rude. No, I didn't mean it like that. It's like, okay. Can we talk about the Egypt stuff now? That's kind of what I wanted to get.
You didn't get enough?
Just kidding. No, that's a really rude thing to say, like, yada, yada, yada. No. I meant it more like, that's, yes. And then we took, the podcast has never taken such a left turn that way, in a way.
Okay,
you know what I mean?
That's what you're saying. Yeah. Well, it's, you know, I think that's just him, you know, he's had a few careers.
I wanted to talk
and
more
they've been
about
different. You know, when I ran into him a couple of weeks ago, he couldn't tell me too much about what his actual day job is right now, but it sounds fascinating. And has
is it related to that?
Well, he's got a business called Pacific Light and Hologram.
He's working on Project Bluebeam.
What is that?
You've never heard of that? Dude, you got to go to conspiracy camp with me. Because, like, dude, people listen. You don't know what that is? Oh my goodness! Google it.
Is it like lasers from space? I don't want to look it up. I'll get on a list.
You're gonna get flagged by the FBI. See, this is why I went blah blah blah. Because it's like now we're talking about the good stuff, Alex.
Come on.
Okay, so okay, so what he talked about a lot of stuff there at the end, and I was telling you that a lot of people, I think, he talked about a lot of history stuff, and I don't know where he learned it at university or read books or something. And people have different opinions about a lot of that stuff, and like we talked about how that is, if you play like what are those Egypt games? No, Assassin's Creed.
Oh, okay.
They have like, how they have like alternate history, and a lot of people, and there's like conspiracy, and there's like the aliens.
Yeah.
Like it really made me think a lot about.
You set off some alarms there when you mentioned aliens.
Oh, he didn't like that yet. No, I could see why. I've heard other people. Yeah, it's really easy being out here to accept stuff like that, aliens and all that.
Anyways, what does that mean out here? What is out here? Texas?
Well, we don't have buildings like that here in Texas. I mean, maybe there are some like ancient, Indian, American Indian,
Mayan
native
temples, but they're in South America.
But that's South America. Yeah, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
We don't see that,
Okay.
Yeah, I wanted to talk.
You still haven't told me what the blue beam. What is blue beam? Is it?
Okay, so there is this. Then this is real. There is a government.
Hold on a second. Time out, just for everybody, so you know. This is the same as a beginning of a conversation I had with Aaron about 10 years ago, where it was chemtrails, and he said these are.
I didn't say chemtrails. I was at a party, and a friend's wife started talking about chemtrails, and I just repeated what she said, and I've become the chemtrail guy now. Okay, and they're real too. By the way.
So you should,
they just changed the name to, what is it called now? Like
exhaust. Exhaust is
global,
real. I believe that.
Yeah. They make cloud farming, I think it's called. Anyways, so what was I saying? Oh yeah, there's this project where Bluebeam, and it is a hologram that they are trying to project into the air. And they, and the idea is that they'll like fake a second coming of Jesus or aliens. UFOs is the big one. Or Muhammad. They want to fake a big thing. Kind of like, War of the Worlds, when that first aired on the radio.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, people
think about that as Project Bluebeam. Yeah, Project Bluebeam.
Okay, so when you say they,
they is them.
Who's they?
Them.
We don't know.
It's what is it called? The proverbial they.
Okay, you're theorizing that perhaps it's Seamus.
The global elite. Well, I mean, he's contracted probably. We got to get him on again and hear more about this hologram stuff.
I don't know. If he listens to the episode, he might not be interested. Who knows?
Okay. But hey, just so everybody knows, whenever I'm talking about this stuff, Alex always goes blah 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 blah. He checks out so fast.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us this week.
Come on, we had to take another left turn. We had to take two left turns. Now we're back.
I had a good time. I had a good time with this episode. I had a great time catching up with Seamus, and
the tales of Egypt.
Yeah,
the parting of waters. Oh, by the way, that's
right.
That's another one. There's I believe that the Jews crossed the Red Sea and the parting and Moses and all that. They found chariots in the water where that happened. Stuff like that. Like, I'd love to talk about that stuff with Seamus, see what he thinks about it. Because they're Egyptian chariots. I'm like, why are they?
I think you got his email address. Go help yourself. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.
See you later. Blah, blah, blah. Thank you for listening to the Fourth Curtain Podcast. To get a peek at upcoming episodes or to send in questions to the show, visit our site at thefourthcurtain.com. And be sure to follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks again for listening.